Hey, what's up guys? So I've been playing Enhancement Shaman on the Shadowlands Beta for about a week now, and I'm here to give you my initial thoughts on it. First of all, some background. If you don't know me, I play in Future right now, and I've done about 10 Mythic plus 10 keys on the beta, of which most of were on time. And I did about 4 or 5 with Kana to compare some things about Shaman. So I also did Infinite Torghast a few times, and I did the raid testing of all 4 bosses pretty much. And currently I'm really enjoying Enhancement Shaman on the beta. The spec can become quite complex with a lot of room of improvement, even on like second to second decisions, which I really like. But it's a big change of the playstyle from refreshing buffs, pressing filler and then spamming Storm Strike when it procs. With my current talent setup, I generate Maelstrom and I also generate stacks for Frost Shock with Hailstorm here. And I need to manage these. I also need to make sure I never refresh my Hailstorm stacks and I don't overcap on Maelstrom stacks. So, of course, if I would have different talents, the rotation would be different and probably less complicated, but let's give it a shot. So, make sure you always have your Wind Fury down. At the moment I don't have a tracker for it, but it's beta, so it doesn't matter too much. I mean, I track it here, but yeah. So, we press Flame Shock. I'm probably gonna fuck up the rotation a little bit here, because, well, I have to explain at the same time. Yeah, you keep Flame Shock up. This Flame Shock thing on AoE, it's something you don't really worry about too much if you use the Frost Shock talent. Mainly because like it has a 6-second cooldown, as you can see, and it's on AoE, you get so many resources that it's impossible to like pretty much ever cast Flame Shock without losing DPS because Frost Shock is just so strong. Okay, so we keep Flame Shock up, Storm Strike as per usual, then Lava Lash is lower priority. But the thing about this is it's really hard to tell what is which priority without simulations, because there's a lot of situations. If you have Lashing Flames and Hot Hand, if both of these are up and you have the legendary, then I'm pretty sure Lava Lash is always above Storm Strike, or not always, but like depending on the procs and stuff. And Lava Lash is also affected by mastery and all that shit. It's the thing about current Shaman is it actually gets really complicated with knowing what to press depending on your talents and the whole situation, just because you don't really, you would have to simulate to figure out what is the best. Anyway, so Flame Shock, Storm Strike, Lava Lash. I'm not gonna use my cooldowns here because as a filler I also press Crash Lightning. So on single target it's quite easy. Okay, so now I have above 5 Maelstrom stacks. When I have above 5 Maelstrom stacks, I can cast either Chain Lightning or Lightning Bolts instantly for more damage. When I cast this, because of my Hailstorm talent, I now get 5 stacks of this. And what this does is it increases the damage and the amount of targets I hit with my Frost Shock. And it does a lot of damage, so if I do Frost Shock now, it hit for 1600, which if you haven't played beta, it doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a lot. So we just keep doing this. I mean, keep this up. Oh. And I keep pressing this as a filler pretty much, my Crash Lightning, because I need to press something. So on single target, sometimes you might get a lot of procs, and you might think like, oh, I can't skip Flame Shock up. Okay, so you have 5 stacks of Hailstorm, and then 6 stacks of Maelstrom up, and you might think, oh, I have to press Frost Shock, but you can press Flame Shock, keep doing the rotation, just make sure you don't overcap pretty much. Oh, I waited a long time, but now I can do Frost Shock and I can still do Lightning Bolt. And I kept my Flame Shock up while I didn't lose any of my stacks from either Maelstrom or my Frost Shock stacks. And I didn't overlap them. So that's one of the things, for example, that it won't determine your DPS completely. But these are the small kind of things you do to get your DPS slightly higher. And the high skill things you can do that I was talking about. So currently with the talent setup, this is what we play for Mythic Plus. At least both Kana and me have been playing this, as far as I know. I haven't really tried Elemental Blasts, but I'm not sure if I really want to add an extra button. For AoE, it feels like Forceful Winds together with Storm Fury is a really nice choice. And then Hailstorm. This talent throw currently, I don't think either of us have played anything else because Frost Shock is so damn strong right now. One of the reasons it's also so damn strong is because we use an Elemental Legendary, which if we deal fire damage, our next Frost spell does 30% more, dealing Frost damage, next Nature spell deals 20% more, and dealing Nature damage increases our next Fire spell damage. This works on Flame Shock, Frost Shock, Lightning Bolt, and Chain Lightning pretty much, which means that there's not really any overlap in spells. So anytime you cast any of those spells, they pretty much have the buff active because, for example, dealing fire damage increases your frost damage. Our auto attacks deal fire damage if we have Flame Tongue up. So we don't have to worry about that. Then our frost damage increases our next nature spell. This one is kind of trickier, mainly because, well, it's not super tricky, but this will only proc after we do what's called Frost Shock, because we don't really have any other frost spells as far as I know. Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning is also nature damage, so if you would cast any of those, your Flame Shock would deal 20% more damage. So pretty much all our spells are buffed at all times, even if you don't really pay attention to it, which means this is a really strong legendary. I don't know if it's intended to be like this, because you can't even make this legendary on enhancement. You have to spec into elemental to make it. But yeah, currently it's really strong, and Frost Shock is already strong, and because we buff it even more with this legendary, it's kind of busted. On AoE you do like, it does 40% of your damage pretty much. It kind of depends on what kind of AoE, but so if I would proc it here, how much damage? See how much damage that did? That was like 55% of my damage was Frost Shock there. And on AoE, the rotation gets a bit more interesting because, well, we generate so much that you generally have more things to press than you have time for, which makes AoE kind of interesting right now, because without simulations or doing a lot of like calculations, I'm not sure in which situations it's best to press which button. But if we, let me just build some Maelstrom stack. Okay, so see how fast they build? And we nearly have Frost Shock again, and then we can do this again. Like, you can pretty much do Frost Shock constantly. Like, I'm building Maelstrom stacks nearly faster than I can cast my Frost Shocks. Honestly, the rotation would become so much easier, which is kind of funny. It would become so much easier if there was no timer on our shocks. But if they would take that away, I guess it would also become a lot less fun at the same time. So I guess we'll have to see how it works later on. Anyway, this talent is just utility. Here I've only worked with Sundering really. I don't see why I would want Crashing Storm. I don't think the zones overlap. If they do, then Crashing Storm might be useful, but basically Sundering, it mini stuns them, which is really useful for dungeons. And I think damage wise, every 40 seconds 1850 damage. 249 over 6 seconds. Like, I'm pretty sure Sundering does more damage. Although, see, some of these things are like hard to check, because some things are affected by mastery and some are not, and it doesn't display in the tooltip. So Sundering, it says causing flame strike damage. Flame strike damage. It doesn't say fire damage, so does it work with mastery? Who the fuck knows? And then Crashing Storm is nature damage, so this does work with mastery. So honestly, like, if you check the numbers, Crashing Storm looks way weaker, but it probably gets buffed by mastery, and if this does not get buffed, then Crashing Storm is probably stronger. So some of these things we really like might depend on your mastery, and we'll have to check out with simulations, but currently I'm always going for Sundering for dungeons because, well, the stun is so strong. Then the last row, Elemental Spirits is the easiest. Ascendance I'm not a big fan of right now. I tried it, but I have so many things to press that I can't really press Stormstrike on cooldown. Like, whenever I pop Ascendance, I have like, especially on single target on pool, when you have like Bloodlust and everything, your haste goes so fast, your attacks go so fast that you generate so many Maelstrom stacks, and you get your you have to keep casting Frost Shocks and Chain Lightnings that Ascendance becomes kind of annoying to use. It's still possible because you can weave your Storm Strikes, but currently I prefer Elemental Spirits. I tried Earthen Spike as well, but with Earthen Spike it's like, it's another button to press. I try to work like around my Earthen Spike because, well, 20% more damage for 10 seconds. I try to like pool and then Earthen Spike and then use everything. On single target without Bloodlust, this is probably fine. But the second there's any AoE involved, this becomes like really complicated to know what to press. So currently I've been learning Elemental Spirits most of the time. Now the next thing I'm going to talk about is Covenants. Currently I have a character on the Kyrian Covenant and on the Nightfey Covenant. People have been saying that the Kyrian one is the best one, but I tried the Nightfey one just because it looked interesting, and I actually prefer the Nightfey one. Even though the Nightfey one has a channel, I'll show you in a second by the way. The Nightfey one has a channel, I still kind of prefer it. I'll show you in a second why. So, the Kyrian one, with these things, I don't know what they're called. Soulbind powers, I have no clue which ones are the best ones. It's like, what happened? Did they deselect? I think they did. This probably stopped working. Yeah, it's really hard to know. So this one is the only one that has 3 potency ones as far as I know. So you would think this one is the best one. But then if you look at it, some of these, like this one for example, if you pick this route, you don't get a potency conduit, but you do get about 5% crit on AoE. Like our potency ones are really good. But then some of these might also be better than some of our potency ones, so I guess we'll have to see once we have simulations for this stuff. Currently we only have, I think, 4 potency ones. I think they added a few new ones. Because, yeah, this one, I didn't see this one last time. I saw Kana using it and he said like, oh, you don't have it? Yeah, we only have 4 potency ones right now, so it depends which one is better depending on the situation, which, you know, is one of the problems that that everyone has with the system, where we want to be able to change them without having them removed. Because, for example, the Lava Lash one I just picked up, where is it? Lava Lash has an additional 25% critical strike chance. This one is really good if you combine it with these two, which we use on the raid testing on single target. And you also equip the legendary for Lava Lash, then this suddenly becomes really good. Like, if you're not able to swap these around freely, this is gonna become a big problem where like, oh, it's a single target boss, we have to swap. Oh, it's an AoE boss, we have to swap. But anyway, it's really hard to know what is like the best right now. We just use the one with 3 potency because it makes the most sense. It sounds the strongest. We kind of have to check it out later. So anyway, the Kyrian ability, it's called Vesper Totem. You put it down and the next 3 attacks will cause an AoE explosion and damage, and the next 3 heals will cause an AoE heal. One of the cool things that I'm glad they added is if you cast it again, you can see on the right bottom here, the button like looks different. You can actually replace it. So if you're in a fight, the tank pulls a pack, you place it, and then the tank pulls it all the way over here. You can just press the button again, you can move it. Anyway, this was just one small thing that I'm glad they added, because it feels like one of those things that everyone would complain about, but they don't actually do anything about. Oh, well, I took too much time explaining, so it disappeared. So give me half a minute and then I'll be back. Okay, so the ability is back off cooldown. So I'll show you. It's, yeah, the next 3 damage piles, or attacks. So if I would now do Storm Strike, it explodes on everything for 1000 damage. Again, 1000 damage. Again, 1000 damage. And now, if I do damage, it's not gonna explode anymore. But if I cast a heal, like Healing Stream Totem, everybody gets a heal. I cast Healing Surge, everybody gets a heal. Healing Surge, everybody gets a heal. It's really nice. So now I'm gonna show you the Nightfey ability. Okay, sadly the Nightfey does not have any training dummies, so we're gonna have to show it here. There's not as many, but anyway. So the Nightfey ability is a channel and it does damage. And then for all the 25% of the damage you did, if you press it again, it will explode in healing. Now honestly, yesterday we tested the boss, it had a lot of AoE. I pressed this ability, and then when it was done, everybody took damage at some point. I just pressed it again, and the amount of healing it did is insane. Because it does up to 8 allies. So it does damage to up to 4 enemies, but it does healing up to 8 allies. And because I hit 4 enemies, it basically healed a full HP bar. So I have 22k HP here. So with this scaling, you can just imagine it doing 20k healing on 8 people. It's fucking ridiculous. Like, to be fair, I'm not sure why everywhere online I've been reading that for Shaman or Enhancement, the only viable one is the Kyrian one, but might be completely wrong. Anyway, so one of the cool things I found out, the reason why I wanted to test out Nightfey in the first place, is because it does nature damage. I don't think it's affected by our mastery, but something it is affected by, let me just swap this out because I wanted to test something. It is affected by the elemental legendary, where if you deal frost damage, your next nature spell will deal 25% more damage. In other words, it says 9135 damage to For enemies over 2.3 seconds, pressed Frost Shock, it's now 10,966 damage, which instantly makes it 25% better than the number that it displays. If you remember, the damage of the Vesper Totem was what, 1000 damage? 2000 if it crits? Now the damage of this thing, it is a 2-minute cooldown however, so note. It hits for 1800 every tick, which is nearly, like the base tick is nearly higher than a normal hit from the Vesper Totem. So this was only 3 enemies I hit, and this was without any buffs except for the Frost Shock, and it did 35.9k damage. If you take the other one on 3 enemies, if you say, even if it would do 1.5 thousand damage on 3 enemies 3 times, that's 4.5 times 3 is 13.5. Now that cooldown is 1 minute, so if you multiply that by 2, it's 27k? It would be 27k. That is if it would crit 50% of the time. So 27k, which is weaker than Fate Transfusion. Now this could be only because of this legendary that I'm using. But in general, I feel like it's easier to use. Because sometimes with Vesper Totem, you place it down, you do a few hits, like the tank pulls them out while you're doing an attack. And then you instantly lose some of the damage. While this, even though it's a channel and you lose some globals. Let's say there was one boss where he charges to a wall yesterday. He takes 100% increased damage for 8 seconds. You only get 8 seconds. So you get like knockback. You have to stand away because you don't want to get hit by the charge. You do Frost Shock from afar and then you just do the Fate Transfusion. And then you can just jump in and do a few attacks. So even though it does take some globals away, I still feel like it's either in the current situation just as good or better. But I guess we'll have to see. At least healing wise, it feels a lot better. Like, it's pretty nuts. Let me just... It's 5 seconds until it's up, I'll show you. Can only hit 3 targets, I think. Yeah. So on 3 targets, I have 22.6k HP, I explode. I did 12k healing. So if I had another target, it would be like, what, 16k? So 16k, that's 75% of a health bar. And it doesn't on 8 people. Like... I don't know, but I feel like on some bosses that might be really useful. In dungeons, it's also really useful. Although in dungeons with the Vesper Totem is also really strong. Just I feel it's not that strong, but you have it up more often, which is kind of nice. But also one thing, let me just log over again. I'll show you something. So one thing I had on this character, which was we had a dungeon where we had a lot of AoE. We had a lot of AoE and I generated so many stacks that I could just keep spamming chain heal. And I was healing more than a healer. Like, it's pretty nuts. If you think about it, like you lose some damage as enhancement, obviously, if you press healing spells. But it's kind of crazy how on AoE situations, we could literally do so much healing. It's crazy. Like, the utility on enhancement right now is so nice. Like, you can just save people. You can heal them to full with like one ability. It's pretty nuts. So let's do normal rotation here on 5 enemies and cast our chain heal as much as we can, pretty much. Sometimes, one thing that is a bit annoying about enhancement is sometimes it feels like if you don't get like a little bit lucky, you don't even have to be that... Oh fuck, I cast a chain lightning. I'm just so used to it. Okay, so this would be the 3rd chain heal in a row. And I don't know how long we're fighting. Okay, this is what I'm talking about. Sometimes you get unlucky, even though it's 5 enemies. I had everything on cooldown. Well, I could press Frost Shock, but if we didn't have that, I had everything on cooldown. Which means I need to either hope my auto attack gives me a Maelstrom stack, or I need to hope that I just need to wait for one of my abilities to come back and then use that and hope for a Maelstrom stack. This on AoE does not happen often, but when it does happen, you just see everybody else do a ton of AoE and you're just sitting there like waiting for your next proc. But this on AoE, on single target, happens a lot more often on enhancement. I don't mind it too much. I kind of minded it at the start, but when we did raid testing, we were scaled to item level 200, and I didn't really have the problem. So I think this is just like a thing that only really happens at the very, very start of the expansion, but I guess we'll see. Anyway, this video has kind of been like just me talking about random things about Enhancement Shaman, but that's mainly because I didn't really write a script for this. I just decided to just go in and show you guys some stuff and what I think about it. If you have any questions, just put them in the comments and I'll try to reply to them. Anyway, thanks for watching and see you next time.